I can go so far.
This one's not.
Stumble in.
It's an accident.
Okay, yes, we can hear you. Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council of the University City, Texas. It is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. It is now 6:35 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order and call for a quorum check, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Here.
Councilmember Buck,
Here.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Here.
Councilmember Najarian,
Here.
Councilmember Shelby,
Here.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Here.
The quorum is present. We shall proceed. The invocation this evening will be given by Councilmember Vaughan, and I'll lead us in the pledge afterwards, so everyone please stand.
Dear God, we pray we have the patience to listen to everyone's ideas, treat each other with respect, and that we can make decisions that are in the best interest of our residents and businesses. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I'm not sure we can handle those two guys to my left here. Okay, all right. Thank you everyone for attending this evening. Really great attendance. Really appreciate the activity and the involvement of our citizens because it helps make the process a whole lot more solid. I really appreciate that. For the proclamation introduction, one of the things I would like to do this evening is I have a special recognition to make this evening. And just about every day and week, people celebrate national whatever it is day or week, right? Pretty much happens every single day. There's something special. One such subject was brought to me recently by Ms. Kim Eichelhart in the audience there. It just so happens that in mid-March, since 2005, there's been a celebration called Sunshine Week. I suspect probably absolutely none of you know what that was. I did not either. So I really thank Kim for bringing that to my attention. Interestingly enough, Sunshine Week was established by the American Society of News Editors and is now called the News Leaders Association. It's a nonprofit organization that promotes principled journalism and fights for freedom of information and open government. Don't we all, obviously. This week also coincides with National Freedom of Information Day, which is another interesting. This is also a little tidbit trivia for you, okay? On March 16th, which also happens to be the birthday of the fourth President of the United States, James Madison. The week serves as an important reminder that government leaders and agencies are accountable to the citizens who have a right to know what government is doing at all levels. I'm reading this because I want you to get the perspective on this. And it represents the interests of all citizens. I completely agree with those principles. Sunshine Week is a national nonpartisan effort to highlight the critical role of open government and freedom of information at the local, state, and federal levels. To that end, during Sunshine Week next week and throughout the year, I encourage our citizens to attend council meetings whenever possible and to address us on items or issues of concern. Your participation in Citizens to be Heard and at public meetings is very helpful to us, and it does not fall on deaf ears. Thank you, Ms. Eichelhart, for your active involvement. Happy Sunshine Week, everyone. So now you have a piece of trivia that you can take along with you. But I really fully agree with the principles of the Newspaper Society. Of course, their role is to be the watchdog of the government. You guys need to be the watchdog of us as well. So I appreciate that, and thank you very much for your efforts, man. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on now to our consent agenda, which is there are 3 items. All matters listed on the item are considered routine by City Council, as you can see, enacted by a motion. No separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. So the 3 items are the minutes of the Tuesday, February 21, 2023 meeting, and the second reading for ordinance about 655-I-2023 on permit for administrative and business office use at 2101 Pat Booker, And the third one is also the second reading for Resolution 947, 2023, to purchase real property located at 520 Padbrook Road.
Move for approval.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Shelby,
Second.
second by Councilmember Goolsby. Discussion.
Can we pull item C for a separate vote, please?
Excuse me?
Can we pull item C for a separate vote?
Yes, okay, so we'll pull item C then. The motion for approval for, actually, we'll have to.
Just note that there were some changes in the minutes that were presented, and so you're voting on the revised minutes that were placed before you. Thank you, Mr. Neville.
No, Mr. Vaughan wants to pull item C for separate consideration. All right, so what, actually, the motion would be for.
I'll amend my motion to cover items A and B.
Okay, all right, there, Mr. Goolsby, is that good? Okay.
I'll second this.
All right, call for the vote, then, please.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Okay, good. So those two items then go. So we'll actually now go to consider Resolution 947, 2023. It's a resolution of the Universal City Economic Development Corporation authorizing the purchase of real property located at 520 Petbrook Road and providing for signatory authority. This would be our second reading on this one.
Move for approval for item C.
Second.
Okay, there's a move for approval and a motion for approval and a second for item C. I'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Vaughan?
Just vote, it's fine.
Okay. All right, call for the vote, then, please.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
I think we got that.
Okay,
was it an
I
aye?
had just taken a drink of water, I apologize.
I just want to confirm that was an aye?
Correct, it was an aye.
Okay. Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
No.
Okay, then the motion passes. Move on now then to citizens to be heard. As you can see, matters listed in this item are considered routine by council. We really appreciate the involvement by our citizens and encourage you to participate. And that's what open government is all about. We get a chance to hear from you, and it really helps us very, very much. So we do have 6 individuals that have signed up this evening. I'll call you up in order that you sign on the document. So the first person this evening, Ms. Ashton Bowman.
Ashton Bowman, 12807 El Dorado. It's wonderful that the venue tax is on the agenda tonight for discussion. However, I'm really hoping that after tonight's discussion, you can make this an action item and vote on it. I truly believe this issue is bigger than the city council. I believe that the venue tax should be put up for a vote by the citizens. The citizens should get to decide whether they want this money to continue to go to a venue tax, i.e. the golf course, or a straight maintenance tax. I firmly believe the residents of Universal City deserve a say. I'm hoping that council sees it this way as well tonight. This needs to become an action item that is voted on at the next city council meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Next individual this evening, Mr. Bernard Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. There are 2 items, maybe 3, that I'd like to bring up in short order. And the first one is not venue tax. The first one has to deal with my reading of some history of the city recently. And what I noticed was that our council utilizes our council members with 2 hats. In council and also in the Economic Development Board, and this has actually been a practice since the 90s, at least from what I saw. I asked you, can councilmen serve 2 masters? Have any councilman ever recused themselves of a vote in this council chamber who have participated in the Economic Development Committee? Now, these men are honorable men. They're trying to do a good job. The basic question is, there's an appearance of, and I use this term that Councilman Buck will understand because of his military background, but this leads to an appearance of conflict of interest, if not conflict of interest. So basically, it unfairly weights council's decisions at the get-go. So I just asked council to please consider the decision, maybe even have the legal counselor weigh in on it. The second item has to deal with the venue tax. I agree with the vivacious pink lady, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of her here. Basically, I'd like to draw your attention to the 1997 May article in the Herald by Dan Vega. And basically, we're not asking for a big concept here. We're asking for what he stated in 1997. The original pledge of the sales tax was for capital improvement, i.e. better streets, sidewalks, and sidewalks for protection of our children, and so forth. That still holds true today as a priority for our city. So please consider moving venue tax change forward on that. The third item, The third item has to deal with input from the citizens. As you know, many of us, 4 of us before you, essentially are canvassing the neighborhood for citizens' input also, not just the few that are able to show up at council meeting, but many. And one thing that I just leave in your mind is the 2 instances where essentially an 80-year-old proud police academy gal, feisty lady about this high, essentially says, my husband has a long-term care issue, and basically the city cited me for having a bump in my sidewalk. Now, if we know that the residents are responsible for the bump in their sidewalk, okay, and she spent money to repair that, but she was near tears because she's on a fixed income. So in considering venue taxes, sales tax, and so forth, remember that you are taking it out of the pockets of the citizens, okay? So they have infrastructure needs too, okay? So the last thing has, I'm over my time, and I'll yield to the next speaker. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. LaVonne. Okay, next individual assigned this evening is Mr. Richard Edwards. Oh, excuse me, this came out of the heart. Sorry, Mr. Edwards. Who was one now?
I'm just trying to take all the candidates ahead. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Tim Iglehart. I live at 736 Garden Meadow Drive. 15 years ago, in 2008, Universal City conducted a comprehensive engineering assessment of our streets and developed 4 different 10-year work plans to bring them up to standards. What happened? Here we are 15 years later. We just approved $30 million in bonds to address sometime over the next 15 years some of the 100 streets from a 15-year-old list that still are in need of repair. That is to say, 15 years from now, or 30 years since the original study, about 50 or more of these streets will still be on the list awaiting repairs. With poorly maintained infrastructure, the seed is planted. Residents take less pride in maintaining their properties, values go down, and crime rates go up. This is not the vision of Universal City any of us has, yet it is the reality. This is not acceptable. We owe it to the people of our community to tackle this problem sooner rather than later. We owe it to the next generation to leave them either on debt or deplorable streets, not both, and preferably neither. I'm requesting that the venue tax be put to a vote of the people. My recommendation is that the 0.5% be divided into 4/8, with 3/8 going for street maintenance and 1/8 going to the general fund. From there, it can be doled out, only as needed, to the golf course. Otherwise, it can be used for other general fund essential expenses, such as police and fire protection. By law, a street maintenance sales tax is required to be resubmitted to the voters every 4 years, thereby giving us built-in flexibility. Finally, in recognition of the fact that next week is Sunshine Week, it is fitting to note that my knowledge of these 4 10-year plans created back in 2008 came by way of an open records request. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Ms. Arrow, appreciate it. Okay, next man, Mr. Richard.
My name is Richard Edwards. I live at 209 Tree Lane. I'm concerned about the Aviation District, and I'm very interested in the presentation and the update tonight. Having studied the conceptual plans, and I realize they are conceptual. Still, having studied them, the ones that are available on our website, I've concluded that the underlying intent of the plan is at least threefold. First, it is to increase venue tax revenue through tourist and dining attractions. Second, it is to eradicate a dilapidated neighborhood and all who live there. Third, to construct large, modern apartment buildings, lots of them, plus row houses, condominiums, small single-family dwellings with tiny yards. This will probably more than triple the current population there, creating what may be the most densely populated area this side of the Pearl Center. The utility proceeds and the ad valorem taxes will most likely go way up. Lots of money. But it's been said that there are those on this council who liken our city to a latter-day Mayberry. No doubt a reference to the Andy Griffith TV show. But what is Mayberry? Is it a tourist attraction or a business hub? No. It's an all-American small town. Universal City is a real-life all-American small town. Now there's another old show I would remind you of. It's broadcast every Christmas season. It's a movie starring Jimmy Stewart. I refer to It's a Wonderful Life. If you remember, the villain in that movie is Mr. Potter. He owns a lot of rental property and half the city. He's a man driven by lust of money and control. He doesn't care about the people. He calls them suckers. He's all about what he considers progress. This Aviation District Master Plan would never happen in Mayberry, nor would it be welcome in Bailey Park. It is, in every essential, a blueprint for a latter-day Pottersville. How do we justify such a transformation? Are we blinded by lust of money? Are we indifferent to the poor and the unwashed? If completed, how will this affect the surrounding neighborhoods? Do we even care? Or are they just a bunch of suckers too? Well, I do care. And I hope tonight's presentation will ease my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Next individual this evening, Mr. Ken Mitz.
And I have some copies for those here in the audience. If they want one, they can take one. If not, she can pass them on. My name's Ken Metz. I live at 13410 Adonis. And I want to first thank the mayor for the education on Sunshine Lake. I had no idea. I appreciate what it stands for and what it represents. And I want to preface my comments to say that I'm not anti-golf course. The staff at the golf course and the event center are professional and very valuable employees for the city. My only goal is to make sure that there's accurate information is disseminated to the voters for them to decide if they want to continue to allow 25% of the city's sales tax revenues to go and be committed directly to the golf course. The first paper on the background paper on articles and pamphlets relating to the 1997 bond, $7.3 million to build the course, or some excerpts, and I want to thank Councilman Buck for his research. It's helpful to me and giving me some information. And I point to the major things. Jerry Geyer, chairman for 4UC, a pro golf course group, said in an Express News article, this wasn't about a golf course, but revenue for the city. A brochure created and distributed prior to the 1997 bond vote stated, when revenues from the golf course have paid off the bonds, the course will belong to the citizens of Universal City. Surplus funds will be able to be used by the city and will help offset any increase in local taxes. We know no golf course revenues were used to pay off that bond. We know the course has resulted in higher taxes for the residents of UC since over 17 million of sales tax revenues have been diverted to the course since 2003. So who paid for the 17 million of diverted funds? The residents of Universal City. That deficit was made up via property tax increases. Without the sales tax revenue transfers, the course would have closed shortly after opening. Larry Kirko, a councilman and president of UC Industrial Corporation, published a brochure in 1997 saying, the course gives the mayor a source of revenues which can be used for park development or future tax burden relief. The course has not provided any funds to the city for park development or tax burden relief. And I just want to make sure that, and before there's talk about whether or not the golf course is profitable, I just ask that the city really look at the expenses, and that they should break out the event center from the golf course. Because the event center, I think, is contributing significantly to the golf course. So you take a look at that and make sure that all expenses, to include water or what else it might be, are properly charged to the golf course and aren't under an expense by the city. The second one is the history of the golf course and the bonds. You can read that. It talks about, you passed 1997, it's going to pay for itself. 2002, you go, oops, this isn't working as we think. We don't want to raise property taxes, so what do? We put the vote 25% of the sales tax revenue to go to the golf course to support it. And that's what's been supporting the golf course since then. City charter, and I think it's just time for citizens to begin to vote again. City charter issues, back in 2022, I spoke about the need for a dollar threshold for city contracts. City charter requires it, I don't know if that's been done. Establish what the media of general circulation would be to comply with section 6.06 of the city charter. And on the aviation district plan, I recommend that a detailed plan of actions to implement phase 1 of the ADP and require a monthly update on the status of the action items associated with creating the aviation district plan. And finally, the street maintenance bond, same thing, require a monthly update on the status of all street maintenance exit activities associated with this bond. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Smith. Okay, the last individual signed up this evening is Mr. Hector Lopez.
My name is Hector Lopez. I live at 146 Endor Drive. I've lived in Universal City since the early 90s. I didn't know, I never saw much about the golf course when these little pamphlets were handed out to people. And from what I read on the internet, my first impressions of that was that it was all patent lies. Because between then and now, we've probably spent between $25 to $30 million on that golf course. And now we've just taken a $30 million bond issue for the streets. Is that what we did? When you ask a city official if we can have the basketball courts at Universal City Park paved over, we're told we don't have money for that. But when a certain group of people come up to you, probably a very special group of people, telling you that they want to play pickleball 30 years later, it's paid like that. Now, I could care less where the money came from. I don't care if AAA plumbing needed the money or not. That could have been done 30 years ago. If you take a look at the disc golf course, which is not really a disc golf course, okay? That facility, that area is just in tatters. You've got, if you walk along the hiking path in the back of the park. If you notice to the right, there's a truck up on a hill that the homeless live in. I know the homeless live in there because I followed them back there before. I hike there all the time. That's not the only place I hike. I hike all over the freaking state, excuse me. But, I'm sorry, a little upset about this. Because this is going to lead back to the golf course and the venue tax. The golf course can be profitable. The problem is not the golf course. The problem is not the golfers. The problem is previous members, people that sat in the same chairs that you guys are in today. And the problem is in the people that have been running the golf course, because they're not doing the job that they should be doing. And the problem with it is it's not money, it's image. It's the image that you guys have perpetuated for the past 20 years. It's an image that shows the average people on fixed income, people that can't afford it, people that don't play golf. You've demonstrated to them that they don't belong there. And that is the feeling that they get. I've been to the golf course. My sons both golf. One of them still golfs. Neither one will use Universal City. And not for those reasons. There are other reasons why they don't. If you can fix the image problem, the money will come. Now, I've done a short study on the golf course, and I'm still working on how to repurpose or fix the problems that we have. And you can do that. It's not as difficult as you think. It takes vision. I read a study by a University of Florida law student that helped to repurpose a golf course. They kept all 18 holes. They kept the clubhouse. In fact, they were able to expand the clubhouse that they had. And you know how they did it? They invited the public. They made it inclusive. And how did they make it inclusive? Americans are pedestrians. We like to watch. We like to walk. We like nature. We like all of those things. In Seattle, on their golf course, an existing golf course that was going under, they built a trail going around the entire golf course. But it was mostly a boardwalk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. A boardwalk. It was nice. It lit up at night. And you know what? People came. People that had never golfed before. And they sat around in areas of the golf course that they were able to sit in, whatever they did. I'm not sure what they did. But they were able to walk on that boardwalk, watch the golfers play, not interfere with the gaming at all. And they were able to raise more funds that way because those same people went into the clubhouse and had a meal. Mom and dad had cocktails. They took the kids for a walk. They saw all of that. Then they introduced yoga at the course. They took a course maker and they had outdoor yoga and Tai Chi for older citizens. It works. They made more money because they were inclusive. And I'm asking you to cut this click thing out of the equation and invite everybody in. Thank you.
Okay, those are the individuals that signed up this evening. Did anyone else want to address council that did not get to fill out the form? All right, then we'll proceed. Thank you very much, all of you, for your input. We really appreciate it. Move on now to our business for this evening. First is tab number B, to discuss and to consider a petition for preliminary acceptance of public improvements for the Cibolo Crossing Subdivision. Sir?
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, the Cibolo Crossing is under 3 phases. When complete, it will be 163 lots. This is for phase 1, which is 52 residential lots, and a couple of 900 series, which means open space. And so they have completed that. We have inspected all of the public improvements. It did take a while. They were waiting on a transformer from CPS Energy. In case you all don't know, CPS was out of transformers for a very long time when the manufacturing went down during COVID. It took a long time to get it back up. The lift station out there for the sewer obviously pumps the sewer up, so we had to have a transformer and electric to make that work. We may have some issues with future subdivisions only because CPS has now received the transformers, but 25% of them are faulty. Nevertheless, it's not affecting phase 1 at this point because they've got their transformer finally. And so they are asking for a preliminary acceptance of all public improvements. to include water system, sanitary sewer system, drainage, and streets. And so we have this before you. It will be on preliminary acceptance for approximately 1 year. As we near the 1 year mark, we will go back in and do our final inspections and have them correct anything that had gone wrong in that 1 year period. And then once that is done, we'll go into final acceptance for phase 1.
Move for approval. Second.
Councilmember Goolsby, second by Councilmember Shelby. Open it up for discussion. Mr. Vaughan?
So a question, are we going to be responsible for that giant retaining wall that they put in as soon as you go in on the right? Is that public improvement that we'd be responsible
Is the retaining wall, can you recall, is that retaining wall for the bridge or is it for the first lot?
for? Yeah,
Yeah, it's for the first lot, so it'll be on a private property.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, we don't like retaining walls.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, and this, it's not just Randy, I did see that the engineer has signed off on this as well, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Inspected by Randy Matt, who's also our Public Works manager, and then our engineer for this project.
Okay. Thank you very much. I wanted to make sure that it was the engineer as well. Thank
Yes,
you very
sir.
much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other discussion? All right, call that roll, please, good.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
That motion passes. Mr. Buck, if I forget to acknowledge you occasionally, please just come on and tell us what you want. I forgot to say, did you want anything to say at all? Okay. Anyone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have made my presence.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is tab number C. Discuss and to consider a petition for preliminary acceptance of public improvements for the LaVonne Villa subdivision.
Thank you, Mayor. Same type of project, different location. So this is for the LaVonne Villa subdivision, which is 10 residential lots containing a duplex on each lot. So it's 20 family dwelling units. This particular project also is a preliminary acceptance, so we'll have the 1 year where they'll be under the preliminary, includes the water, sanitary sewer system, drainage, and the streets. The project, in case people can't imagine where it is, sometimes when I say the old Northview School, they'll remember that particular area. And so that is the new subdivision that is down in that area. If you drive down there, you can see all the streets and everything. And of course, there's a fence around it now, so you can't get to it most of the time. But they are asking for preliminary acceptance as well, sir.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Motion made, Councilmember Najarian.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Shelby. Discussion, anyone? I think Ms. Turner gave you an idea where it all is. Let's start with Mr. Shelby, then Mr. Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To clarify, is it where the school was, or is it next to where the school was?
Next to the school.
Okay,
If
so,
you're on their lot, you can actually see the school parking lot.
okay, so if you're looking at the school, where the school,
It's to the right of the school.
thank you very much.
Good. Mr. Neville?
Is there any reason why they couldn't have put one of those public spaces at the other end of the, instead of having both on the same end of the subdivision?
Are you talking about the parking lot?
No, it says the public places.
So this does not have a public space in it. You're actually looking at 2 ingress-egress points.
So,
Why does it say park open space?
Oh, I see what he's talking about. Okay, thank you. Yeah, the parking lot. Okay, go ahead. Address it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So yes, at the entrance off of Bird, you have 2 open spaces. We wanted to provide for top lot if possible, for some green space. And then we also asked them to include additional parking, which you see on lot 4, which is up in the northwest corner, because we anticipate the need for guest parking and additional tenant or resident parking there.
Very good. But they can't put one on the other end?
On the other one? In the design, it didn't really make sense to put it on the other end. This meets, either way, it meets the requirement for open space, and so we thought it was a good idea to have it on Bird.
Thank you.
Mr. Buck? I see you. Mr. Vaughan pointed me in your direction.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm reading from Colorado Springs. That's a live shot of Colorado Springs as far as any of you knows. Tim, for the newbies on the council, can you explain the history of that subdivision? I think this is the first time that I've heard about it. Was the PUD, when was it approved, et cetera, et cetera? Other than that, from images that I've seen of the area, it looks amazing and much better than what it was, but just a brief, like 30-second history of that subdivision, if you would.
Yeah, so this is not a PUD. This property has changed ownership numerous times. One of the owners, gosh, maybe as long as 15 years ago, had come and petitioned the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council for I believe it was a conditional use permit to allow duplexes in a single-family residential. The P&Z had denied the request, if I'm remembering, and as did the staff recommended denial as well. The City Council overrode it and at that time decided that it would be a good fit for that particular neighborhood, primarily because it is next to the school and because it is next to two apartment complexes. So that's the general history of it. As you can see, it's a very small, they took like 6 small parcels and combined them into one, and it does have 2 street fronts. And so the concern, obviously, from the fire perspective and for the tenants getting in and out, they did decide that they wanted 2 means of ingress, egress, which is how they came up with the design that they have. And quite frankly, given the size of the lot and the shape of the lot, the street with the elbow in it, or some people call it a small half a cul-de-sac, works well for this particular project.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. No further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bud. Anyone else? Okay, let's call for the vote then.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Motion passes. I think it's going to be a nice addition to that area and Universal City, definitely. And Mr. Neville and I were certainly on council when that decision was made. We did overrule P&Z, saying that we think that this is a good fit. So it's not a rubber stamp. I just want to make sure that. Okay, tab number D. Discuss and to consider an extension of the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, with Reunion Development Partners, LLC. Ms. Turner?
Thank you, Mayor. Because we have obviously some new members in the audience that may not know what we're talking about, if you would indulge me, I'll give a little bit of a background. So both the city and the EDC purchased property, which now is considered behind Walmart, and goes all the way out to Loop 1604, so it's behind HEB, behind Walmart, runs all the way down to West Third, where the Victory Assembly of God Church is. So we held that property as an investment, the EDC did. The voters last year, or the year before, sorry, I'm getting my elections confused now that we're talking about so many of them, held a special election and they agreed to remove the parkland designation for that property with the intent of the city developing it for commercial or mixed-use development. So we sent out an RFP to receive proposals from various firms. We got proposals back. Their design or concept pitches were made to the City Council and the EDC. They selected a group. The group calls themselves Reunion Development. They requested an MOU of understanding to begin working with the City Council, the city staff, and the EDC on the particular designs and parameters and the things that we need to agree on as the project goes through. So we signed that MOU. It was for approximately 6 months, I believe, and they are requesting at this time that we have made significant progress, and they are requesting that we extend that MOU up until the point that we get to the sales contract or the approval of the development agreement with the City Council and the EDC.
Okay. Let me entertain a motion and we'll open for discussion.
Move for approval.
Councilmember Shelby. Second. Motion second by Councilmember Najarian. All right, discussion. Very interesting project. I think Ms. Turner laid it out to you. You can see exactly. Oh, Mr. Buck, did you have something to say?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do. It appears the only item requested for this approval is an extension of the time frame, right? Set a new effective date.
Yes, sir. an extension of time. You are correct.
Okay, the original contract states, and I'm going to quote here, if substantial progress is being made, the term may be extended by mutual written consent of the parties. Can you explain to council, since they're not privy to the discussions that you're having with Union LLC, what significant progress is being made, if you can elaborate and essentially convince council that this is a good thing for us to approve the 6-month extension of the contract?
Sure. And I do want to clarify that we have had discussions with City Council about this, but just remind all of you that it's been an executive session because this is an economic development negotiation. So I'll give some highlights. So from the staff perspective, we have been working on the preliminary redesign of the signal light that goes into the Walmart entrance. Remember, that's not part of their project, that's part of our planning for that, because with the significant traffic increase, we, as a city, will have an extensive amount of flow coming through that intersection and going on and off Kitty Hawk. We have a draft agreement for additional land. If you all remember, we've had that discussion, and that we did authorize them to include some additional land within the reunion development project to increase the frontage along Kitty Hawk Road, ingress, egress, and frontage along Kitty Hawk Road. We have a preliminary layout for streets. We'll be having discussions on the cost of the streets, who's responsible for what, and all of that items. We do have a generalized phasing plan for the project. Remember, some of you will remember, and when they made their concept plan to the public after the executive session that we had, that they had multiple phases for their project. So we've been going through and looking at the various options for phasing and how that should happen. So we worked with that. We've had some preliminary discussions with TxDOT, remembering that 1604 is a TxDOT road. So ingress, egress points along 1604 obviously is very important to the project. And with the completion of the frontage road and the sidewalks and dealing with all the topography in that area, because it is hilly, we're kind of waiting on TxDOT to bless where they would like their ingress, egress points to go. Michael has done a great job working on the planned unit development components. I know you've seen what that looks like. We've been through a few, as well as defining what we mean by retail, what we mean by commercial, what we mean by multifamily, and all the other intended uses, and clarifying those within the PUD. We have defined a process with our legal counsel for the transfer and sale of the land when that is to occur. We've kind of set it up so that we don't have too many documents for consideration, so we'll try to rack and stack those into just as few meetings as possible for the EDC and the City Council. And then we have some possible design schematics for cuts and islands on Kitty Hawk. Now again, that's not Reunion's project, that's the staff project, right? Because now it's probably going to end up with a little more traffic, so we have to figure out how we're going to flow that with the other development that'll be happening. And the last thing that we have is we have a draft development agreement, which is a very voluminous document that lays out all the aspects of the project. And so we've been having discussions with them on that as well.
Mr. Butler?
Thank you, Ms. Turner, and I apologize if I came across as sounding like you were trying to keep information from the City Council. That's not at all what I meant. Just that we only meet 2 times a month, generally speaking, and you and Michael are doing yeoman's work trying to get this project moving forward. I just kind of wanted to hear a status of exactly the details that you just provided. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, lots of moving parts on this project. Lots of moving parts.
Mr. Goolsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so basically what I'm hearing is that we're not just running with the first idea that looks all bright and shiny. We're checking to see if there are pitfalls for every little idea. We're running through multiple ideas to make sure everything is in good shape, and then we're inspecting the impacts of all of those, and not just sticking to some date that's on the piece of paper on the document.
Yes, sir. I would call risk assessments, right? If this is going to go here, what's going to happen there, how will that affect? Yeah, we're running through all of that with them.
Okay, I thank you very much. I do appreciate that you brought it to us to extend so that we don't run off kind of half-cocked on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, very good. Call for the vote, then, please.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Exciting project. I think you'll be really, really pleased with this result. Okay, next two items are.
May I make just one more comment?
Yes, ma'am.
So sometimes when we embark on projects of this nature, people get the impression that it's going to be happening overnight. And I just want to remind you that we've discussed this before in our public meetings, that projects of this nature take 7 to 10 years to get to fruition. So don't expect to be seeing a lot of physical signs all at one time. A lot of it's just discussion, negotiation, paperwork, all the busy stuff. So that's my last comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, the next two items are, there are no tabs on these. One is the presentation, and the next one is the presentation and update on the Aviation District Master Plans. Ms. Turner?
Yes, sir. As you know, the council and the EDC have been having some meetings with regard to the Aviation District. Again, like with the reunion project, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion. And so we started on this project in 2019, and then we did the presentation during COVID, which we did via Zoom, and a lot of people, joined us at the college and learned about the project. But on the interim, we've been doing a lot of, as much work as we can when we were working through COVID, although that was a difficult part. But as you know, we have components of the Aviation District that we've been working on, and we just thought maybe it would be prudent and time for an update, recognizing that the EDC members and the City Council probably know what's going on, but this will give a chance for the public to be reminded of this project, that again, it is a master plan and it does take time, but we are diligently working to put components of it together to bring it to fruition. So with that, I'm going to call up Michael. There he is. He's going to go to the big board, but Kristen's going to move, or Maribel, they're going to move the smaller boards at the same time. So whichever one you can see easiest on is up for grabs.
Can you all see the different boards?
Is it okay to turn a little?
Feel free to move yourself. Well, they can look at the back board. If you have good eyesight for two, if you're closer to Michael, you can look at the biggest board. Whichever is most comfortable. The chairs do changing council members.
Steven's talking to
No, I'm good.
Not like everybody was looking at me suddenly.
You're right in the middle of it.
Always looking at you.
They are.
Who's looking at you, kid?
We're still in the way.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Kim. So, as she mentioned, about 2.5 years ago, actually about 3 years ago, we had AECOM consultants put together a master plan for the Aviation District. And so about 2.5 years ago, that master plan, which you see here, did go before P&Z, or Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as City Council, and did receive approval. It was not officially codified as a layover or an amendment to the zoning code, but it does provide the framework for what we'd like to see for the vision for that area. And what I'll just start out by saying is that all these different components that you see, the high-density single-family residential, the row homes, which are depicted by these rectangles, and then the mixed-use development, which means retail on the first floor, and then condos or apartments above. And then the commercial pieces, this is a hotel. These are all interchangeable. So this plan is not set in stone, meaning that the town square, which is identified here, does not have to go right there, depending on the market. It could be relocated. And I'll touch on that a little later in the presentation. And so, since City Council approved this plan, we've taken some steps, about 5 steps, to try and bring this plan to fruition. And so I'll touch on those. And so the first one that we did was a complete reconstruction of Aviation Boulevard. And so that means new infrastructure, new water and sewer mains to provide for adequate capacity as this master plan redevelops. And then curb and gutter, new streets, and sidewalks. The second thing that we've done, as well as the EDC, so the EDC made an investment, a public investment into the Gather Brewery. And as you know, the Gather Brewery has been extremely successful. and it has brought more people into this area, which is what we're looking to do. We're looking to bring life at night, but we're also looking to bring people into this area during the day, at lunchtime, on both the weekdays as well as the weekends. And so Gather Brewery was the first test case, and the EDC contributed to their success, and we're very happy with where that is going. On the other side of Pat Booker Road, in this area here, this half block.
Could you kind of give us a color hint? Because you're pointing on that one, but we're not getting points on any of the others.
So the Gather Brewery is located right next to Bill Miller. Okay, and so that was the second project that I mentioned. Nope, if you can go back, thanks. Nope.
Sorry.
Okay, so Gather Brewery is right over here. Okay.
Thank you. She's
And
doing
then
it well now.
she's doing it with the mouse, okay. And then on the other side of Pat Booker Road, on Houston, Langley, and Aviation, there's a half block that there's an old dilapidated house that is there. It's a brown home, but if you've driven by recently, they've begun the renovations of that home, and it's going to be converted into an eatery of sorts, and it'll provide synergy with the mobile food truck park that is directly related to that. So again, that will bring more activity during the day. It'll provide more options for the folks that work at the base, which is great because they bring in activity to our town. And we want to provide those eateries and those places for them to go. Not only during lunch, but also again on the weekends. So we're trying to invigorate this area of town. And so those three projects have helped. The fourth thing that we've done is we have engaged at a preliminary stage with TxDOT for the reconfiguration, if any, of Pat Booker Road. Primarily what we want them to look at is the curb cuts, because if you drive up and down Pat Booker Road, it's really essentially one big curb cut, and that's not really safe for pedestrians, for drivers, for the business owners. So as part of that reconstruction down the road, after we work it out with TxDOT, we'll identify where the curb and gutter needs to go, where those curb cuts, meaning the driveways that get you into the specific lots, need to go. The last thing that we've done, step 5, is the EDC has been acquiring property. And so the more property that the city acquires, we control our destiny if we own those properties. And so all of these lots that are identified in yellow, the EDC has either purchased and closed on those properties, or they will close by July. And so I'm going to focus on this area up here, okay? And that's at Pat Booker Road and Bird Boulevard. And so just to give you a frame of reference, this main chunk right here, fronting Pat Booker Road is where the ATM is currently for Techstar Bank. And then right behind it is their drive-through. And then on the other side of Bowie is you had a couple of single-family homes. One was torn down, but anyway, the city or the EDC did acquire those properties, and they made that public investment to help control and provide the framework for those developments. The EDC and the city will not be developing those properties. We will be releasing RFPs to get ideas as to what the market can sustain. So by providing that public investment as they did with the Gather Brewery, we feel that this will help bring this master plan to fruition much quicker and get the city and EDC what they want to see here. And so I'll just go through a concept that staff has brainstormed and come up with for different land use types on these properties up here. So again, this is just a general idea of what the area that we're looking at. Again, this is where the ATM is, this is where the drive-through is, this is Bowie Boulevard, and this is the properties that the city or the EDC has acquired. So in general, an overview, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, the town square, which was in the master plan, located closer to the base or Aviation Boulevard, it doesn't necessarily have to go there. And the market has allowed us to acquire these properties, and it makes sense to make that public investment and relocate and establish that village square up here. And the importance of this these lots right here is that you have frontage on two streets. One on our main boulevard, Pat Booker, and then secondary access off of Bird Boulevard. Now, these properties combined are large enough, I'm gonna go right to that one, large enough to accommodate an amphitheater if the EDC and city see fit for that. But it also, in addition to the amphitheater, allows for active green space or open space. So if you can picture the amphitheater in this area right here, it does provide for adequate seating for a concert or a smaller event. But then also these areas here and here are still large enough to provide for some active space outside of the amphitheater or that concert. The next property, which abuts the town square, is what we have designated for apartments or condos. Now this would be a private investment. The market would dictate. The city would put out an RFP, request for proposals, to see what the builders, what the developers are thinking. What can the market sustain? What can it hold? And so our idea here, and these are some examples, real examples of what that lot could accommodate. So it provides for either market, so owner-occupied units or rentals. But 5 stories could provide from 48 to 60 units, 12 units per floor. Again, the private side would determine what exactly that building would look like. And then next to that, we have a parking garage. But really what this is, most likely, there's 2 ways that this could unfold. One is surface level parking, which is what this area needs. And Gather has demonstrated that. They have a parking issue, which is a good thing, right? So we need to provide for some interim parking. And so this area, or this lot here, could provide, if it were just surface parking, about 100 to 120 parking spaces, which is great, because not only would it allow for the Gather to have adequate off-site parking, but also the other businesses in this area, especially as this area redevelops. And then the second option, maybe if the market dictates, is a garage. And so a garage could get about 220 spaces, but I wanted to show you this existing garage that is really nicely done. It's kind of hidden, it doesn't scream out parking garage, public parking right here. It's designed nicely, it's 2 stories. It provides access on both sides, and again, 220 spaces. And it kind of blends into and provides what we're looking for with that new urbanist style and that residential look and feel. And so right next to that, we have a pocket park, which is another public investment. This is a pocket park is a smaller park, which allows for people to walk their dogs, some benches to just stroll, but it also, more importantly, provides a buffer between the new development and the existing single-family residences. And so, with that said, the last slide shows the row homes. Again, this would be a private development. The market would dictate, but we believe that this fits the vision because it provides for that new urbanist style. And so this is an example of approximately the same size. And so this block here, this half block, is perfectly sized because it does have an alley. And that's one of the benefits that the Aviation District does have, is alleys. So it lends to this type of development. And the reason why it lends to it is rear loading garages. So you're able to move those buildings closer to the street, provide that new urbanist, that pedestrian-friendly feel. And with that, I'm happy to answer some questions.
No, I'm sorry, sir.
Mayor, if I could just add a couple more comments that I wrote down while Michael was speaking, and perhaps this might answer some of the questions. If not, Mr. Edwards will be here after the meeting to answer questions for you. So I want to just point out that we've discussed on this whole thing that he used the concept of life at night. And some people say, oh, nightlife is just going to be a bunch of bars, you know, what's that, 6th Street in Austin or whatever. So that is nightlife, right? Bars typically are considered nightlife. And what we're talking about is life at night. What do you want to go and do after you get off work, if you're going to go hang out with people, or you're going to go somewhere with your kids, or it's a weekend and you want to just get out of the house and do something? That's life at night. Maybe it's ice cream, maybe it's coffee, maybe it is alcohol, maybe it is not alcohol, maybe it's just take the dog down to the dog park and hang out with the kids for a while. that is life at night. So in this particular area of town, it has so many unique features, and it has a lot of space that is right, as Michael had said, for revitalization or reinvigoration. And you notice that we're really just now focusing only on the commercial area. And that when we're going in and buying up these properties, or the EDC is, we didn't reach out to a lot of these people about buying their properties. They're reaching out to us. I know there's been some comments, oh, you're just Machiavellian and you're just sending people out of their houses and their businesses. We're not. We're not asking people, and we're not taking over their businesses. If they want to stay, they can stay for as long as they want. But, you know, at some point, they will be pressured maybe into conforming with what is happening down in that area. The also thing that I want to recognize that what we have here is a conceptual plan. I hope people don't get latched onto this is exactly what it's going to look like, because again, with the reunion and with all the projects that we do, it takes a while for that concept to be developed. And again, this is a long-term plan, but we've made some really good strides on it to get the catalyst going. And then the last thing I just want to remind people that is that as Michael went through his project, he talked about public investment and private investment. And I know it's a philosophical argument and not everybody agrees with it, but you know, sometimes in order for us to change or guide the destiny of the city, there are public improvements that we have to be made. I'll use North Lake as a matter of fact. So nothing happened in North Lake for, gosh, I don't know, well, since 1986. And then at that time, the city decided to take control of that particular area, put in some public investment in there with streets and water and sewer and overhead electrical lines. And now we have a business park. And we're still working on the business park, so it happens over time. I just want to note that there is a public side of this and there is a private side of this. And so we'll do our best to keep the plan moving forward and try to keep everybody up to date when we have significant improvements that have occurred.
This could have been handled in the city manager's discussion, but we thought it very prudent to have it as a special presentation this evening. So not only the council can get an update of what's going on, because we're pretty familiar with what's happening, obviously, but you in the audience would have a better feel for exactly what this potential project is going to yield for Universal City. So, Mr. Edwards, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is not the time for questions.
Okay.
But offline, absolutely, no problem. Absolutely. Okay, unless there's any other specific comments anybody would like to make regarding this, I think this is a very good overall presentation. We're very familiar with Mr. Vaughan.
I just have some questions. I'm an accountant, so I lack urban planning vision, so this is hard. I'm glad you guys
There
are
are
thinking
numbers
about
that
it.
we love you too.
Yes. So, but I would like to ask about some numbers. I mean, I know the EDC has issued some bonds to
Yes.
purchase these properties. Is it enough to accomplish what you want to accomplish, or is this a drop in the bucket? Or because this is quite a big area that we're looking to try to
Right,
change,
so
right?
the ultimate goal was to try to put enough land together for a plaza area, right? Again, like Michael said, we thought it would be down by FM 78. It didn't happen that way. All the big pieces of land that were available happened to be closer to Techstar Bank because, you know, they're giving up all of their land except for the one where the physical bank is today. So that was kind of it. But yes, at this point, we have enough land garnered that we could start working on the plaza concept now. And so they have all of the land for that. They have a couple of other pieces of land which people have offered to sale that we are considering. And we have a kind of a right of first refusal, so to speak, on a other couple of pieces of land that might assist this plaza area. But I think that the EDC has, in my opinion, wisely used the funds that they had, the $3.5 million, to acquire properties that could be used in interim for other uses, leased out. They have a building two buildings actually that they could now lease out and have rental income on it until we figure out the other areas of it. So yes, number-wise, they've spent their money.
So do we have
Kristen's given me a peace sign. No, that's not a peace sign.
We've committed 2.5 out of the 3.4
2.5
million between property acquisition and then the street projects that we've authorized for design.
Thank you. And you mentioned that we're gonna try to do RFPs for the stuff to develop. Is there a backup plan? I mean, if we have people that maybe get scared of the railroad track or the airplane noise and don't issue proposals or ask for an ungodly amount of assistance from us, do we have a backup plan? For the stuff that we've already acquired?
With something else that we've acquired?
With all the property we've already acquired, I mean, if we don't get RFPs and people aren't willing to build what the vision is, do we have a backup plan?
Well, the city can obviously build the plaza area itself without even having the private development in there. In that general area of town, there are really no places for people to go. You know, they can go down to the Veterans Park or they can hike otherwhere, but you know, if you want to have a downtown area or a central business district or a place for life at night, we have the land, we could do that now. One of the things that we've talked about interim, even with just this Techstar mobile banking thing, you know, we can set up even now to have open market days down there or other things in the interim just to generate the interest that we need. But in terms of the private development, so you know, full disclosure, every time a real estate agent comes into town looking for, of course, we're pitching the Aviation District Plan to them so that they can catch that vision as well. And I'm going to say that we've had a tremendous amount of interest from the private developers. But again, you know, they want to know what the city's going to do and what our timeline is, so we'll continue pushing forward with our plans.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear, anything that any of the EC invests in that doesn't become public-only property goes to a private developer investor, the EC is going to get their money back plus the increase in value of the land.
Right, so, and I think this is what Mr. Vaughan was intimating too. Is there a potential that somebody might say to the EDC, yes, I want to invest, you know, $8 million, whatever it happens to be, I'm sure it's more than $8 million, to put in an apartment complex with, you know, the parking underground or whatever it happens to be. But in order for that to be feasible for me, I need you to give me the land. Well, that's when the numbers for people come and they say, okay, well, if the land value is this, the improvement is this, the water, sewer, gas, franchise fees, whatever, then you start running your numbers to figure out what your return on your investment is, which is what we do with every project.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I have something.
It's just a discussion item. Mr. Buck, do you have something, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I do. From some of the residents that I've heard from over the last year now that I've been on council and since I started running, some people have expressed a concern about the use of eminent domain to claim any properties or something like that with a focus on developing the aviation district over the welfare and benefit of the residents. Can you speak to or reassure us of lack of intention to use eminent domain in order to take away people's homes potentially? Thank you.
Thank you. So there are two things. One, we don't even talk about eminent domain. There's no reason to do it when we can, you know, negotiate in good faith. If the city did do eminent domain, we would have to give them fair market value for their property and probably a few other concessions as well. But eminent domain is just not even in our language when we're dealing with this. And you have to remember, right now we're only dealing with commercial properties. We're not dealing with residential. Now, we did pick up a couple of residential homes, but they were in a commercial district. You know, the family wanted to sell them. They all belong to the same family. We said, sure, it makes sense if we're going to buy one, which is all we really asked for, we might as well buy all four. And so, you know, that was a good deal for us. And the other thing that you have to understand in terms of the EDC, by state law, they really only work on commercial projects. They don't work on single-family residential projects. And so we won't be doing, the EDC won't be doing that project. And then somebody says, well, they're doing apartment, but apartment is considered a commercial property. It's not considered a private residential property. So we're not doing eminent domain. We're only buying property from people who come to us and say they want to sell it. And there are people who have offered to sell their property to us, but we don't want it. It's not in our target area where we're looking. They're just hoping to get out of their property, and especially with the COVID that it did for their balance sheet. So, no, we're not doing eminent domain. And nobody's getting kicked out of their house.
Thank you, I appreciate that. No further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? Again, this was just a presentation, so I'm glad you did. Thank you, Michael. It was a very good presentation. I think that gave you a great update, everyone in the audience, as to what the potential is. It's unlimited, the potential for that aviation district. And as you mentioned, Gather has been a real cornerstone to everything that's happening there. By the way, they were named the best brewery in the area by the Express News, I think, recently, so.
I'll also add in that they've had, this past Saturday, they had their highest one-day sales. What did they say that was called, Kristen?
Since their grand opening, our highest daily revenue.
Yeah, since their grand opening, Saturday was their highest daily revenue.
So that, they're kind of like the anchor to this whole potential redevelopment, and the success of Gather is, I think that's going to spin off tremendously to a lot of other potential businesses coming in. As Kim said to Michael, that there's been a lot of interest, and the progress looks really promising for all of us. So let's not keep our fingers crossed, let's just keep pursuing it. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I want to just mention one more thing.
One more
before
thing.
we jump into the next one. So I just want to point out that the concept for the aviation district did come out from the consultants, but that they interviewed and surveyed a large chunk of people in the Universal City area to ask them what they wanted down there. They talked to police, they talked to fire, probably some council members. They talked to residents in that area. And so I feel like we've had a lot of public input on what needs to happen in that area. And this is kind of their vision.
Many of us got involved in that initial activity, including people from the base.
Yes, they participated as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Let's move on to tab number B now, tab 2, excuse me, to discuss the venue tax revenue. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Stephen.
Thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate everyone's comments in the beginning, because I kind of feel like maybe there's some common threads that they're giving us that we need to consider as we move forward. And so thinking back on what we had talked about in the last few meetings, I thought maybe I would just kind of recap, and I call it so far, here's what we've talked about, or what I believe council has agreed upon thus far. And so I heard it said at the last couple of meetings, from all of you, and that you have said that no one really wants to get rid of the golf course. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay, I see some head shakes. And the other thing that we talked about, and I believe everybody agreed to, is that the golf course and the facility do need some repairs and upgrades and possibly an expansion. Did we come to an agreement on that?
I think it's worth looking at.
Okay.
It's not that.
I think you identified the needs for the course.
Just want to make sure we're all starting out on a playing level field. And I think that the other thing that I had mentioned, and I hope that we're in an understanding of that, is that for the fiscal year of 2023, that the venue tax is already committed. So we're not really talking about the 2023 venue tax, because that is committed to the final bond payment. And then also that was authorized for the erosion repair on holes 6 and 7, I believe it is. So we all understood that. Okay, great. And then this is one where I think we are today, that for 2024, which is our upcoming budget cycle, that there are options available to the city that were not possible before because of the debt burden that we had on the golf course. And what most people don't understand is when the debt was set up, it had balloon payments at the end. And so almost all of the venue tax that we had toward the last 3 or 4 years of the venue tax really just went to pay off the final debt on it, which is one of the reasons why we weren't able to make a lot of repairs in the last few years. And so I just want to make sure that we're all understanding that 2023 is kind of done and over with for the venue tax, and we're really talking 2024 and forward.
Understand? Everybody understand? I think everybody does, yeah.
Thank you. And then the last thing that I think that we're all in agreement on is that the consideration of future uses and division of the venue tax needs to be considered, and that there are probably some options available to us, and we need to work some of those out. So I think that we're all in agreement on that so far as well. So I just kind of wanted to lay out there what I think we all agree to, so that maybe we don't have to rehash those ideas, and that we, from that point, can kind of start moving forward. Okay. So then I started thinking about the last council meetings and some of the discussions that were had, and I decided that, well, maybe we need to think about what we have not yet agreed upon and kind of start working from there. So I think what council has not yet agreed upon is, what is the end goal, right? Is it some, is it all, is it 8, is it quarter, is it none? I don't think that we have established what the end goal is, but I believe that we can get there with enough discussion. And then what are some of the compromises and alternatives to get to that end goal? One of the things that we kind of skirted over in the discussion is, what is the financing plan? If you're going to make improvements for the golf course, whether it be repair, replace, remodel, expand, whatever you decide that happens to be, what is the financing mechanism that you want for that? And what can we legally do based on the fact that it is a venue? And what does the law allow regarding venue tax, sales tax, general fund? Because all those are different discussions that we need to have. Then the other item, I don't believe I put it in here, but maybe we need to discuss that too, is we know that at one point the golf course, when it was running into an operating shortage, the general fund was loaning the golf course general fund revenues. So we need to put in place a financing plan and how we want to reimburse the general fund and how we're going to go about doing that. So we need to have a refinancing plan as well. And then the other thing that we really haven't discussed is whether or not the golf course will remain an enterprise or it will not remain an enterprise. And if we take it out from being an enterprise and we just classify it as a public amenity, much like the library and the parks and things of that nature, what impact is it going to have on the general fund? And then the other thing, I've mentioned this before, there are options that are available. We know about splitting the venue tax because some of you have talked about that. And we've talked about reallocation, maybe just shifting the venue tax around for reimbursement for the general fund and for the staffing and things of that nature. And then we talked about reallocating it, whether it would be to general fund revenue, a transportation, what does the tax code call that? Street maintenance. And so there are those options which we've generally touched on, but we really haven't had an in-depth discussion on those. And then the last thing is, what is the timeline for implementing whatever final decisions that you come up with? We kind of need a timeline for when all of that is going to happen, because you can't just go out for a vote but not have the financing plan, and you can't go out for a vote and not figure out how you're going to reimburse the general fund. So those are the things that, in my estimation, that we have not yet thoroughly thought out or considered or have a plan in place. So I did go out and look, the next slide if we could please, at some of the options that we need to consider, just so we have them for discussion purposes. And I don't care, what order you take them in, it really doesn't matter at that point. So again, we need some plans and a financing plan for the golf course and the event center improvements. We do need a general fund reimbursement schedule, whether that's going to happen all in 1 year or in 2 years or in 3 years. We haven't had a thorough discussion on general fund transfers. What I mean by that, it's not unusual in enterprise funds that if you have other city staff that are overseeing those operations, which of course would be myself, your public works director, your water and sewer guys to go out and check on everything, your finance department that's doing all their financing, that you can reimburse the city for all of those expenses from the venue tax and then move that fund money into the general fund. One of the options that the state law provides, the venue tax, is to expand the definition of a venue, right? We kind of touched on that last time. You can go back and ask the voters to put all the parks in there and name them, and then you can use the venue tax for all the parks projects that we have, including maintenance and operation. You can add in a downtown plaza, like we had talked about in Michael's last presentation. So there are other things that you can do to ask the voters to expand the use of the venue tax and thereby relieving funds from the general fund having to carry those expenses. And then ask the voters to split the venue tax, right? And this may not even be a question of if, it might just be a question of when do we do that, based on the other plans that we have. And so is it a quarter and a quarter, or is it a quarter, an eighth, and an eighth? And then today I heard 3/8 and a quarter, right? We haven't even fully developed the options for that. And then the other option is to ask the voters whether this is, I don't know if this is good or not, but to put all of the venue tax into the general fund. In other words, do away with the venue tax. Don't know what state law says about that, so we're working on that, but they don't have all the answers right now. Maybe it's a combination of options, we don't know. And then the last thing is maybe there's some other innovative alternatives that through your discussion that you're gonna have, that you've had and that you're gonna have, there may be some other alternatives that we haven't thought of and that allows us to get a little bit more creative. So that is some suggestions or options. And here's kind of what I would hope that we would get out of our discussion. And one is that we kind of need to decide as a group and memorialize the options. I think it was Mr. Mitz, who had the information about the venue tax that when it went in, it started in 93 and it failed, went to 95 and it failed. He mentioned all the people that were on the political action committees that got it passed. And that's been memorialized. Just like with the 2002, when the council went back and asked the voters to approve the venue tax, that's been memorialized. I'm sure there must have been other options that they discussed. I don't know what that is because we don't have any documentation of that. So I would hope that one, we can recognize the complexity of the issue because it is complex because there is a obligation to the residents, right? And that's complex. And then there is an obligation to the golf course, which is complex in itself. And then there is the obligation to future generations not to rush into something without fully understanding what the short-term and the long-term financial pros and cons are of whatever the decision is that's made. And so I think, I would hope we can recognize it's a complex issue. There's many thoughts, many feelings, many opinions, and they all matter. But in the end, it's very complex, and I think we should memorialize all of the options to us so that we can understand now and in the future why we went with the decision that we went with. And then I think it's really important to weed out false information, disingenuous information, misinformation, distracting information. And there's a lot of it out there. Oh my gosh, I almost stopped walking my dog these days because, people, hey, I heard, I don't know where you heard that. It's not true, right? That's about all I can say. And then what I really, really hope, and I don't want to see, is that there is this polarization or partisanship amongst council members, amongst members of the committee, and the council and the committee. I would hope that in getting out all the information, factual information, and all of the options, and then coming down to the best solution, that we can hopefully avoid a lot of that. I've always am proud of the fact when I go and hear other city managers talk, and they talk about their divided council and their divided city, and people who live on one side of the tracks and people who live on the other side. We don't typically deal with that with here, and I would hate for this issue to become that issue that causes the polarization. And then I hope we will commit to exploring the options and understanding the challenges of each option, and that we will consider short and long-term consequences and impacts on future generations. That's all I have.
Okay, let me add one other aspect to this situation when we discuss this venue tax. As you know, the city right now has 8.25%. 6.25% goes to the state. Governor Abbott has made some very strong insinuations that he's going to try to reduce that 6.25% that the state gets down, and he's looking at probably 7.5%, something like that. But what the issue is okay, if they reduce that 6.25 down to 5.75 or whatever it is, what's that effect going to have on the cities? Are we going to still be able to go to the 8.25%, or is there gonna be a restriction on what the cities would be allowed to do? That's something that's up in the air. This is, the legislature is gonna look at this. The governor has not yet made a total recommendation to the legislature, but he has openly said that he is amenable, and he's trying to save money to the taxpayer, reducing the state's take of that 6.25% out of a potential, in our case, 8.25%. So that's something that we need to take into consideration because we don't know what's going to happen. So I think with Ms. Turner saying, let's be cautious about trying to make some decisions without making sure we know exactly where we're going to be, even through this legislative session. And it may not be acted upon at all, but if it is, it'd be something that would happen before June, when the legislature is supposed to adjourn. So I want to make sure the council and you all in the audience are aware that that's a potential. And is it going to cause a problem? Not necessarily. Maybe if they allow us to continue on with whatever it goes down to, and we still keep our 2.5%, or we go, or 2%, excuse me, or go to something else, we honestly don't know what's going to happen. So I think we need to be, understanding of that particular factor. So I just wanted to throw that out as we begin our discussions tonight, because I was in Austin last week to do a couple of testimonies, and I did hear from various members of our delegation that is a potential intent of the governor to make a change into what the state's take on that sales tax is going to be. Okay, so thank you for your presentation, Kim. And again, let's open it up for discussion for everyone. That's what this is all about this evening. And I would just hope that we continue on the discussion because I think it's very meaningful. The last meeting was the same. So let's press on. Who would like to be first?
Mr. Buck has his hand up, sir.
Did you, Phil?
Buck.
Oh, Mr. Buck did. Mr. Buck, you're on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. Ms. Turner, I echo your sentiments of not wanting this to become an issue that divides council. I agree that until now, and I hope it continues into the future, we've been all cooperative, everybody's been respectful. There hasn't been any yelling, there hasn't been any name calls or anything like that, and I don't want to see you keep it like that. I agree with your statement that we have a commitment to the golf course and to the residents of Universal City, but I would also say that we as council members, our obligation to the residents of Universal City outweighs our obligation to the golf course. We represent the residents and we have to make the decisions that we feel are in the best interest of the residents of Universal City. In order to avoid a whole bunch of ums and ahs and you-knows and everything like that, I wrote a statement here that I wish to read to the city council and to the manager and to everybody else that's present tonight so that I can try to summarize everything that I have. You all have before you a packet consisting of flyers and opinion papers that I found in my research into this issue. Is that the case? Yes? Awesome. I said during the council meeting on February 7th that I didn't feel prepared to discuss whether the venue tax should be reallocated because I didn't perceive that was an item on the agenda. In the ensuing month, I've done a bit of research, that's an understatement, and reviewed statements made during that meeting on February 7th. The following is what I've prepared to summarize my findings. In 1997, following the defeat of the measure to build a golf course, the city lobbied for its eventual construction. In July of 1997, Mayor Beckett said approval of construction of the golf course was the, quote, last best chance for the city to move into the 21st century with a bona fide vehicle to provide a source of revenue for years, end quote. Additionally, a group of about 30 mostly current or former military members formed a committee to support the construction and engaged in an outreach program to, quote, inform the residents, end quote, about the initiative. They set up a phone bank in the office space at 1001 Pat Booker, where one participant said he spent most of his free time calling residents of Universal City to encourage them to vote in favor of the measure. As part of their message, they told residents that based on studies conducted, the golf course would pay for its operation, repay its debts, and be a source of revenue that would result in lower property taxes. It's no surprise that construction was approved given that message. 2 years after the course opened, it was clear the course was not funding its operation, much less paying its debt or providing a revenue windfall for the city. Facing its potential default, the voters were asked to approve allocation of 1/2 cent of the city sales tax as a venue tax to repay the bonds issued to fund construction of the course, which was, I believe, between $6.5 and $6 million. In the meantime, that venue tax has brought approximately $18.5 million to our city, the majority of which has gone to fund operation and debt repayment of the golf course. The residents of the city elected me to represent their best interests, and that's what I'm here to speak to tonight. While I have no evidence to claim intentional deception, it is clear that the promises of the golf course did not materialize as they were promised. Fellow council members, you have copies of the collection of flyers and pamphlets distributed in 1997 that made assertions that did not marginalize. Again, I do not assert any malfeasance or intentional misleading of the residents. However, from a resident's perspective, I understand that many might feel they were misled. For this reason, now that the promise of the 2002 venue tax allocation vote that was approved to repay the bonds issued to fund construction of the golf course has been repaid, I believe those same residents should be asked whether they wish to continue allocating the 1/2 cent of our sales tax to a venue tax. To be clear, I am not anti-golf course, as has been asserted in more than 1 or 2 emails or social media comments. But I do believe that reallocation of the venue tax to a revenue stream to allow other priorities to be funded for this great city should be left up to the residents. Reallocation of the tax would free the city and this council from the narrow parameters imposed by the limits of the venue tax. We could continue to fund the golf course, to build a new wedding venue, repair the 8th and 9th holes, and replace the carpet in the event center. But the golf course would not be the only priority to be funded with those $1.6 million raised in 2022. The animal shelter doesn't generate revenue, nor do the library or the splash pad, yet our city continues to fund them because they are legitimate recreational activities for the residents of our city. The golf course should be no different. Notice I did not mention our emergency and first responders. That's a separate category that should not be part of this discussion. The police and fire should be untouchable. Therefore, it is my desire that this council direct city staff to research alternatives to a venue tax. For instance, increasing the general revenue tax, if that is possible, establishing a street maintenance tax to offset the cost of the bonds we will issue following approval in November for up to $30 million. I ask my fellow council members to join me in making that directive to city management as follows: that they present alternatives for a council vote at the meeting to be held on Tuesday, April 4th. That's a month from now. At that meeting, council decides which reallocations to be placed on the ballot in November, and then direct city management to move forward with drafting ballot language. The residents deserve a voice in the future of the golf course, whose funding they approve now that the promises made to them have been fulfilled. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bush? Mr. Vaughan?
Thank you, Ms. Turner, for putting your thoughts together. I appreciate you putting the thought into it. I do think that it overcomplicates the issue because it ties how much we want to spend on the golf course versus how we want our revenue to be structured, and they're not necessarily connected. So if we change the venue tax into a street maintenance sales tax, let's say, we still have a discussion about, do we want to invest this money in the golf course, and how do we want to invest that money in the golf course? And the bigger the number, the more I think we should take the tax away so that we don't have that crutch, so that we make sure that we ask the residents, do we want to invest this much in the golf course? I think at the meeting 2 meetings ago, I believe I demonstrated using the city's budget for the golf course that it is generating a surplus, and that even if we ended the venue tax would still go through April 1st, because if they voted to end it in November, it wouldn't go into effect until April 1st. That it would build enough of a cushion to be able to cover the next 10 years of capital projects that the city had on their list. So ending the venue tax provides it still with a lot of capital needs. You mentioned that a reimbursement to the general fund over all the prior years, I would kind of consider that water under the bridge. At this point, I wouldn't really think that we need to go back and try to figure that out if we can get the golf course on a better footing today. The financing plan for the golf course would be separate, and I would be in favor of a bond election for the golf course. If we wanted to put a package together and let the voters tell us if they want to invest that in the golf course, I think that would be a reasonable approach. You mentioned maybe converting it from enterprise fund into the general fund. I would not be in favor of that. I do think that the golf course is not like a park, because a park is really available for everyone. The golf course is for people who play the golf course. And so I think it should, as much as we possibly can, have it stand on its own. And if we move it into the general fund, then we're going to lose the ability to track if it is being able to cover its costs. And I think that when we look at our tax revenue streams, we should be focusing on what are our biggest needs and not anything that could be considered a want, like the golf course. So if we tie it to other venues, like if we expand the venue tax and we say, well, we want the amphitheater that we saw earlier in the Aviation district, again, that we're tying our hands on something that down the road may not be a wise decision, whereas everybody needs streets. It was very clear from the election for the bonds that streets was very popular. People want us to fix those streets. And so I think that would make the most sense. And I agree with Councilmember Buck to have the city bring back those options of what could we convert the venue tax in, and let us, I think people deserve a vote one way or the other from the councils to know that whether they can get a vote. And so that's what I would also like is to see options maybe in a month or so. I think we have plenty of time before a November election, so it's not a rush, but to have that so that we can make a decision.
If I'm not mistaken, we have until August to make a decision to put it, if we were to take it before the voters.
Yeah, the last day that the state has that the council could call for a ballot on the November election is August 21st.
Okay.
Now, of course, you wouldn't want to wait till the
We've got
last
that
day.
time to continue this dialogue. So if the decision is finally made by you all in council that we want to go to the voters, then we've got plenty of time to still put this package together to give them all the options. We're not sure what those will be. So I just want to make sure we clarify that point.
Okay.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do love the idea of putting this to the voters. My thing is, much like we had earlier, I don't want to jump on the first shiny thing. I do want to have more of this discussion, and I do appreciate Mr. Buck sitting there telling us, you know, we do need somebody with a stick that's going to poke us, but also don't want to jump into something not understanding all the ramifications. I want us to do this methodically and educated. So I am a fan of this. I just don't like a serendipitous 1 month from today. I don't want that. So thank you, Mr. Wood.
I think we totally all agree with that. I'd like to throw out a suggestion for council, where we can have, not in this venue at a council meeting, but have a workshop that we set up, that we all sit down, and the only subject on the agenda is what to do with the venue tax in the future. I would like to propose we do that probably within the next month, that we can just sit down, we can have it at the golf course or wherever location it's open to the public, that they could all come as well. But this would be just an open discussion that we would have, that we could really sit, this is our #1 subject, this is what we need to talk about. We look at all the options, we've heard various presentations, and I think they all have merit. Questions is what do we think is the best approach to take? And so we've got time. This is March the 7th, so we've got time to come up with I think hopefully a very, very well thought out decision as to where we would want to go in our next approach to this activity. So if you guys agree with that, and we'll go ahead and set that up and make it known.
I just have a comment.
Yes, sure. I'm just throwing that out for you for your consideration.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I agree with that idea. I mean, when we spent time, when there was a lot of time put into the Aviation district, there was a lot of thought process put into place. And really where I'm coming from this is not a light switch. This is not a hard right turn. This is a big deal. And as with most things in the city, this is not, hey, I'm going to paint my walls black. They were off-white, now I'm going to paint them black. Like we're not making a big change on a whim. And this is a big change. And I'm going to echo something that Mr. Buck said. We are representatives of the citizens of Universal City, and that includes the citizens that live and who have purchased property around the golf course. So while I'm not leaning on every single one of them as that is where my brain is going, I do have to consider them as well, because I'm not elected, none of us up here are elected to any one district. We are voted up here at large by all citizens of Universal City. So when we think about what we're going to do, when we think about changes that we're going to make, we have to understand that not everybody is going to like the changes that we make. And yes, one of those changes could be getting rid of the venue tax and letting the golf course try and make it on its own, and or shifting the burden of the golf course away from the sales tax revenue over to the property tax revenue. And those are all things that have to be thought about. The golf course, I've heard so many people, it's turned into a park. That's cool. Well, parks still cost money. And so now we have a park that doesn't generate revenue and costs money. That's just one of the many things that we have to think about when we decide what we're going to do. I'm not leaning any way, one way or the other. Do I think the citizens at some point should get a decision sent to them or an option to vote for or against this? Absolutely. But it's our job up here as elected officials and as the board who oversees the city manager to get all of the options, weigh all of the options, discuss all of the options, and put together, hey, we're not just going to turn this switch off. We have these things we have to think about, and we're going to put these things in place to make sure that nothing falters. I mean, and I'm trying to remember, I think it's Northcliffe, the one that's up on Shirks. Drive by Northcliffe. You want to see what a golf course looks like when it runs out of money? I mean, I drive up there, I drive up to Braunfels a couple times a week, and I drive by that and I look at this giant piece of land that is just fading away. And it looks horrible. It's got old cart paths, it's got grass and weeds, and I don't want to see that happen to that area, but we have to figure out how to deal with that. And just, hey, you guys want to get rid of the venue tax? Sure. Let's just put that on the ballot and not think about the long-term effects. In the same way, and I wasn't on council, in '97 I was, 21. I lived in Universal City. I lived over across the street in Peppermill. I didn't know much about what was going on. I probably didn't really care. I was 21. And there were decisions made over those years to build a golf course. They thought and believed that it would make money. It didn't. And now they have invested in putting something in, and they have to make a decision on how to either walk away from it or to find a way to fund it. And they made a decision, and they did their best at that time. And it just didn't land the way we'd see it today. So let's not make the same rash choices. Let's, and I like how you said, memorialize it. Let's think this through before we just flip the switch. Okay? I very much see that, I don't see how this doesn't end up in front of the voters at some point, but it's going to be very informed and very thought out. And if we don't spend the time to do that, we're just going to end up making another quick, rash decision because maybe there's a little bit of emotional involved. Maybe we don't have all of the information we really need to make that decision. And then that decision happens, and now we have a whole new problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We do have time. I totally agree with what you're saying. Mr. Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think some of you, or maybe all of you, are aware that our state legislature has a proposal from Governor Abbott about raising property tax exemptions to $70,000. That's going to put a big burden on those who don't get that exemption. If they keep the schools' taxes the way they are, don't drop them, the burden is going to be pretty big. So, and if the state keeps a 3.5% cap, that we can raise any more taxes unless it goes to the citizens, I don't know what's going to happen. But do we need this discussion? We certainly need this discussion. We need to see the best way we can serve our state. Thank you.
That's another issue. There have been probably around 4,000 bills already introduced in the new legislature. It's unbelievable. And how they're going to be able to act on all of those, God bless them. It's quite a tough. But that is another issue. It's potential of raising the homestead exemption from 40,000 to 70,000 in some cases. And it depends on the ages, and schools and hospitals and other taxing agencies are certainly impacted. So that's going to be an impact too. So that's something we also need to take a look at for sure as we press on. What I see from you all is that we agree something needs to be done. The question is can we take the time to really think this over, to come up with some really solid recommendations that we can make that final decision on where are we going to go to the citizens, or is that the best direction that we need to go? So I do recommend that we have this special workshop where we only discuss this particular item and invite our citizens. Yeah, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I kind of have a question. Is that, in my head, it's the ballot language can have multiple options of what to do with the venue tax. Is that, am I crazy, or is it you have the venue tax or you don't? Or you have venue tax and part of it goes here, 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 and here?
So the question is whether you have multiple bond propositions or you somehow figure out how to roll it into one at such a point that it still makes sense to the voters, right? Because ultimately it has to make sense. We have people here who are listening and concerned and would probably go in and be an informed voter because they've heard all of the discussion, and then you have voters who go in and vote and maybe don't know all of that. So that's a complicated thing. I'm not an attorney, thankfully we have one, and there are ways to write ballots. I'm guessing there's a formula that you have to follow for writing a ballot. And as we go through our options, we have to decide what is that ballot language going to look like, and how do we meet the formula and still make it clear to the voter. So whether it's 1, 2, 3, we don't know, because we don't know what option y'all are going to want to go with.
But it could be, multiple choice, pick your favorite, whichever one gets the most votes. Oh my God.
No, it's going to be it has to be a for or against proposition, and that proposition needs to be something that, in talking with the state comptroller's office, I mean, one option to reduce one and to create or adopt one is the simplest option. You're either for it or you're against it. Once you start getting further out from that, you have no way to be for or against because it's one proposition. So if you start putting multiple propositions on your ballot and multiple pass or they all fail, then you're not in exactly the position you want to be in.
Interesting. Thank you very much. That really helps. Because you pick your favorite 3.
Yeah, this isn't McDonald's or Arby's where you go to the value menu and you say, I'll take a whatever and a whatever, and I want to pay my $2 and I'm done. It's a little more complicated on the ballot than that.
Can you get fries with that?
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, Mr. Najarian.
And just real quickly, I would like to thank Councilman Buck for all his research. Very well done. And I just wanted to say that there wasn't anything that Mr. Shelby had said that I don't disagree with. It was very well stated, and probably a lot of people thought that I'm all for not touching the venue tax, and that's not really true. It was one of those situations, or it is one of those situations where I felt that we were acting too fast without enough information, and after going over everything. Being able to make a more informed decision, I believe this workshop idea is very good for all of us. We need to just hash this out from A to Z, and make a informed decision and bring in front, because I do think that eventually, and it should come in front of the voters. But exactly what do we want to do with that? That's what this is for. So
we have the time. So again, I'm asking, do you all agree that the workshop would be the next step for us as we move along? I think this is going to be very productive, and we'll make sure that it's publicized, highly publicized, so citizens can come and listen, because you would eventually make that decision. If the final decision for us is to go to some change, whatever that stipulation would be, which has to be very succinct. I would suggest that we go ahead. I'll work with the city manager, but let's try to do that sometime within the month of April, early April if possible. And so continue to go. So the light switch is not dim. It's very high.
Buck would like to speak. He's had his hand up for a while.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't see you, Mr. Buck. Yes, sir.
That's okay, Mr. Mayor, you haven't moved on to any other business yet, so I still have an option to speak on this option. I agree with Councilmember Shelby that it shouldn't be a light switch, and to be clear, I don't propose cutting off the golf course from any funding. Your point is well taken, Mr. Mayor, that we do have time until August in order to make that decision, but I would support the focus of the workshop being how we reallocate the venue tax and going towards the voters, not whether we should have a vote to reallocate the venue tax. Thank you, sir.
Well, that can be the outcome of the discussion too, Mr. Buck. I totally agree with you. Totally agree. So there are lots of options still available to us. Let's pursue every potential option, making sure
Mayor, if I
that
might
we
add-
set the stage for what's going to happen in the future.
I might add, people always say, well, I don't play golf and I don't want to pay there to use the facility or to golf or whatever. But you have to go back and what the definition of venue tax is, especially when it's geared towards professional amateur sports. The state law requires that if you're going to do a professional and amateur sport, you can only do it if you are charging admission to the public to use it, which is why we have a golf course where you're paying a fee to play golf, you're paying a fee to eat, you're paying a fee to go to the toga run that we have on it. You can do a certain amount of free community events, but you can't use it primarily as a community facility. There has to be a fee involved with it. Just as a general note, that's why it's called a venue tax, and that's how it's set up in state law, that you have to charge a fee for a sports facility. If you add parks in, they know that those are generally open to the public. Unless it's a state park, you don't pay a fee, but we'll have that discussion later. So yes, thank you, Mayor. Probably what we'll do is, if you and I can talk in the next day or so, we'll try to decide and maybe send out an email whether you want it on a weeknight or if you want it on a weekend, i.e. a Saturday. And so we'll kind of move forward from there. The staff will do some research. Obviously, Megan's doing some research. I also reached out to our financial advisor and our bond counsel, and they very much would like to display some information for you that they believe that you need to consider before you turn the light switch on. Thank you. That's very good. And so we'll garner all of that information and start preparing.
Definitely. I want us all to be there, that's for sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. We'll press on now, and we'll let you know, and we'll work with you on a potential date that we can all get together and do that, and make sure that the publicity is out there so you all know when we're going to be meeting, so you can participate as well in terms of being in the audience. It won't be actually in this setting, I think there will be an opportunity for citizens to be heard when we have a workshop too. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Always in a workshop, just like in a city council meeting, the upfront is citizens to be heard.
Okay.
And they can, still get their 3 minutes.
Okay, so that'll give you all the option then too.
Right, and then once the council goes into their actual work session, then the public is, listening.
Right, but they can speak before the session.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, that completes our business for this evening. So, City Manager, have you got anything else to offer this evening?
I know that May 6th means a lot to most people in this room because you're very interested. I know you're thinking, oh, it's election day. Well, it is also pancake breakfast day, if you remember. So for those of you who like to vote and like to eat, please remember May 6th. The other thing that staff has been working on is at the intersection of Pat Booker Road and Loop 1604, if you drive through that, the railroad tracks are rough. There's a lot of potholes. It's hard to turn. The timing on the light is off. And so we have been working with TxDOT and Union Pacific Railroad to get all of that cleaned up. TxDOT said they would come out this week and investigate to see what they need to do.
76 or
78,
1604.
Yeah, 78 and Pat Hooker Road. And so they're, and they've also, TxDOT on our behalf has reached out to Union Pacific Railroad to have them come out and look at the tracks. Some of you will remember, or no, maybe it was like 8 or 10 years ago, they redid all of the railroad crossings along FM 78. Probably it's time to redo them all again. Let's hope they have money to get that done. This is an unusual item, but I think it's good for Universal City, and hopefully there are some volunteers out there who would want to glom onto this. They are looking for speech and debate judges. The Homeschoolers Association is having their championship here in Universal City. They're using the First Baptist Church. They are looking for judges, so if anybody is interested in either judging speech or debate, I have all the information here so that you can sign up to be a judge. They need about 100 judges, and right now they only have 20. So I'm a fan of homeschoolers, I'm a fan of debate and speech, since, you know, that's what I went to college for. So I would hope that maybe in this room we have some volunteers who might be interested, or have somebody else that they can send to me that might be interested in that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to let you know is, at least we talked at the last budget cycle, we are getting to the point where the fire trucks need to be replaced. They are nearing or at their life limit. And so the fire department is speccing out 2 vehicles. So when we get closer to the budget cycle, we will have some numbers for you. And then at that time, we'll start discussing how you want to go about acquiring or financing those particular objects for the city. And that's all I have now.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Phil, start with you, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask a future agenda item if my council members are interested in it, for a council message board on the website. Boston, San Marcos, and Castroville have these. It would allow us to pitch ideas to each other in between meetings or share information. It's obviously open to the public, so they can see what the council members are thinking prior to the meeting. It might help our meetings go a little bit faster as well, because then we can share that information. But ahead of time, you can see what people are thinking, and then we can kind of come and vote, and everybody can see what they're thinking. So if you guys are interested in that, I would ask for the city to maybe bring back a proposal of what it might cost to add that to the website, and then we can see if it's something that we want to do.
Okay, well, I'll definitely take a look at that with Kim, and we'll take a look at some preliminary things that we could.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll also have to figure out how they got around the Open Meetings Act
My question right
and the Rocking Quorum.
It's local government code 551006. And San Marcos is actually neat because they put the whole agenda on there as each discussion item, and then the council members can add questions, and certain select staff that the council decides can participate in that forum as well, so that you can get feedback from us. So if you wanted to post something and say, what do you think about this PUD? Barry can mark it all up and say, these are all ugly, and fix it before the meeting, and then he doesn't have to do it at a meeting.
But then they wouldn't get to hear me talk.
No, but it's all public. It has to be on the first page of the website so that they can see. You can even do a nice drawing, put it on there. Color coding.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Paul?
I have nothing about it.
Okay, Mr. Neville?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody for their input tonight, especially the citizens that gave us their understanding of what we should do with the venue tax. And I want those to know that I'm open to any positive solution. I do have a problem with the Gateway, our magazine. Most of the information I've seen in it lately is past, not future. We've got to find a way so we have events in the future that are addressed, not, the last Snowfest was already over before the Snowfest came. I know there's a long leadway, but we've got to do something in order to make it
The only way to make that possible is to go 100% online, and here's why. We can't control the publisher, right? They work on their timeline, and we can't guarantee that there's always going to be paper to print it, which is what the issue's been.
I understand.
And then we can't guarantee when the post office is going to deliver it.
I understand. But we've got to have some type of mechanism that allows input to be put that's current, not past tense. There's got to be some way, we have to have another committee to take a look at what we can do with the Gateway. doesn't make sense to have it 2 months behind. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Mayor, I've prepared a statement. I have nothing to say tonight.
I'm not going to forget you, Mr. Buck. Hang on a second. Ms. Goolsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do know that I had a run-in with a guy who was very unhappy years ago about his fence, and he got a citation from staff from the city about he did some work on his fence or something like that, and then he ended up with like this $600-800 bill because he did all these things. And I'm like, well, did you go talk to staff? No, I'm just too mad. Okay, well, go talk to staff about it. It's a big citation for putting up a few boards. He went and talked to staff, and staff was like, we got your attention. Okay, thank you for taking care of this and clarifying it. No, we're not charging. We can waive this here because you're actually going by the rules now. So thank you very much. And it was waived. I had a similar thing happen to me years before being on council. Fire marshal said, your tree is too low, you need to cut it. And here, you need to do it within a week or something like that. And I was irritated, had family issues, we were out of town, wasn't gonna be able to get there, and I call up and just give him an earful, and he says, are you gonna fix it? And I was like, when I can, yes. And he said, thank you. So you're waiving this 1 week thing? Yes, just fix it. Oh, okay. So a lot of times city has to get our attention. And so I understand that, and that people will immediately just overreact, and not because I did. And so I do appreciate the fact that happens to people out here a lot, and I've heard a couple of things like that, and I keep telling them, go talk to staff. They've got your attention, don't they? Go talk to them. And it's amazing how y'all always tend to remedy that, so thank you for doing that. Again, I wish that you didn't have to hit me with the stick to get my attention sometimes, but I understand that you do, so thank you for doing it. The other thing is I know that there's a lot of concerns about the Aviation District and what we're looking to do out there, but my gosh, we are on a path to making this a pedestrian-friendly area that has life at night, life in the day, life during the week, life on the weekends. It would be nice to not say, hey, do y'all want to go to City X to go see this music venue? Do you want to go over here and do that? But to say, hey, why don't y'all come to Universal City and we're going to go do this, this, and this. And I'm very much looking forward to my kids being able to do that because I know this is going to be a long process and it's not going to happen overnight. This is also not a light switch event. I am interested in hearing more. I've never seen what you're talking about. I am interested in hearing about it and looking at those other cities. So don't take my, yes, let's put that on I want to look at it before we, so I am interested in seeing how that works. Because I am still raised by the thing that you don't talk, what happens at council stays at council. You don't talk about council. And that's kind of scary to me. Then I've got one more and I don't know where that note went. I'm assuming that our venue tax discussion is not going to happen on Saturday at the golf course because of the parking issues we have out there.
Oh, you've seen the parking issues.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Councilmember Goolsby had to walk 4 blocks to get to the golf course on the side. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll work on a venue. We'll make sure we have adequate parking.
It just has to be in the city.
And that I do know that we had discussions about some of the things we could do at the golf course that would make it more inclusive of different, it's not just for Joe Golfer, that we have other people out there. It's not just for, not for the bride, but the groom does have some involvement as well. And I'm excited about what could happen at that location, again, to bring more people into UC. I do know that a lot of my clients do play golf there. I don't even drink beer on the carts out there. I stay away from the golf course. It's dangerous for me. But I do know that a lot of the people that outside of Universal City do love our golf course and utilize our golf course. So, other than that, it was a great discussion tonight, y'all. It's been a whole lot of fun. 5 more to go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Vaughan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate it. Thank you to the city staff and everybody that put together the presentation tonight about the aviation district stuff, as well as the presentation on the venue tax revenue and how it's been brought in. I'd also like to thank Jeremy and Sal out of the golf course for the comprehensive tour they gave me last week on Thursday. Showed me what a lot of the concerns were, because I'm a big fan of trying to make informed decisions, and I can't make those informed decisions if I'm not informed. So thank you to them for answering a lot of my questions. For tonight's history lesson, many people might not know that our fiscal year used to run from March 1st to February 29th. But then the city council vote later on changed our fiscal year to be October to the end of September. Back in 1963, when our young city was a mere 3 years old, I'd like for everybody to think about what that annual operating budget might have been for fiscal year 1963. Has everybody formed a number in their head? The approved budget for Universal City for fiscal year 1963 was a whopping $24,590. How far we've come since then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have for the evening.
Oh, yeah, you're so welcome knowledge, Mr. Vaughan. Thank you very much. Okay, just a couple of items. First of all, housekeeping one. This will be the last opportunity to wear this outfit. We will move to our summer attire for our next meeting. And so that we can, so they're taking the ties off. Okay, all right. Okay. All right. Okay, that's one item. Just a reminder for everybody, I think you probably received some information that the waste management brush pickup will be starting on March 27th. You can get actually your materials out on the streets as early as the 22nd. So just heads up that if you've got those leads pick up, you can just put all the bags out there you can, and you got to make sure you're complying with the cubic feet operation. But if you have lots of leads, this is the time to put them out on the street, and they will pick them up. Okay. So having said that, and also Sunday starts daylight saving time, and so you're going to lose an hour's sleep. There's a lot of in fact. I gave my students an option to do a letter to the editor, and one of them chose to talk about daylight saving time, saying that they oppose it. They'd like to have it the way it is, at the standard time, year-round, and not have to worry about it, or daylight, one of the two year-round, and not have to flip-flop every March and every November. So pretty interesting. So again, you're going to lose an hour of sleep on Sunday. So whatever you got planned, make sure you've got that already in your calendar. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed the discussions, and you certainly will get a lot of information about related to that workshop that we're going to have probably in the month of April. So thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned at 8:42.